Very good.
As I mentioned last week, during our struggle for separation, we depended heavily on Reverend Leroy Oliver from Westminster Seminary to provide us with ministers or students each week in the pulpit. And in 1972, he sent to us a senior student to fill our pulpit, and he filled our pulpit for several months, and that was Charlie Dennison. He was 25 years old at the time. He'd just been married, and 2 of their 4 children were born here. In April of 1972, the New Jersey OP Church licensed him, and May the 9th of 1972, he was ordained and installed as our pastor. Charlie had OP background, and so he leaned heavily toward their views on the scripture. And at that time, we apparently didn't have an organist, and his wife played, and so she played our organ at that time. And Charlie realized early in his ministry that there was a lack of understanding of the doctrinal standards of the Presbyterian Church. And in his preaching and teaching, he focused on the essentials of these beliefs, which the congregation appreciated. In July of the 17th of 1976, feeling that he had accomplished what the Lord had sent him here to do, he decided to resign, and he accepted a call to an OP church in Zwickley, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, which was his hometown area. And Charlie died early in his 40s with prostate cancer. He suffered a great deal, and he took his life with an overdose because of the pain he was suffering. And in 1977, Larry Roth came to us, and he served us until 1984. He was 31 years old, and his wife Betty, and they had 2 children. And Larry was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and grew up in Miami, Florida. And Larry graduated from Reformed Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. And he pastored several churches in Florida and South Carolina before moving to this area. And he moved to this area to do graduate work at Westminster Seminary. And he was a pastor in the PCA denomination. In November of the 14th of 76, he was sent from Westminster Seminary to supply our pulpit. And in December the 2nd of 76, after his second visit to fill the pulpit, the congregation was impressed by his preaching, and on the 19th of December, the congregational meeting, a call was extended to him to be our pastor. And on January the 30th of 1977, he was installed as our pastor. After 6 years of independence and the difficulty of finding ministers, it was decided we should be part of a Presbyterian denomination again. And that's when I passed out those. Several months of study was given to the difference between the OP and the PCA. And November the 8th of 1978, the congregation voted to request an admittance into the PCA church. And on January the 79, we were accepted into the Mid-Atlantic Presbytery because there was no New Jersey Presbytery at that time. In April of 1979, Fred and Marion Dix, Eileen Gusweiler's mother and father, passed away within 3 weeks of each other. And Fred was very interested in music, organ music especially. And with this great loss in the church, Larry suggested the purchase of a better organ in their memory. At a congregational meeting, it was decided to replace the Hammond organ. And with Larry's experience as a musician and his past experience, he not only played the pipe organ, but he had experience in repairing and rebuilding pipe organs. With this experience, he was able to guide the committee in the selection of an organ. The Allen digital electric organ was selected without Larry's knowledge. Extra stops, pedals, and speakers were added to the sound we have today. On July the 7th of 79, a new Allen organ was dedicated. The cost of the organ was $10,000, and the money was given by generous people in the church in memory of their loved ones. The tall columns behind the pulpit hold the speakers for the organ. I guess you all realize that. And Merrill Rain, who was a member of the church at that time, and he was a cabinet builder by trade, and he taught woodworking at the Atlantic County Votech School, and he built, with his students, he built those 2 columns that we have today. They had quite a job getting them in the church through one of the windows. And in November of 79, the present chandelier, brass chandeliers that we have in the sanctuary, were given by Dr. George Nitschke's wife in memory of her parents. And was there any of you remember Dr. Nitschke or not? He was from Elmer area and attended church here. In December of 79, major changes were made to the entrance of the church. And the amazing thing to me is there were no complaints. Because I'm sure from earlier there would have been some people in the congregation that objected. But as you came in our sanctuary, there were 2 doors. We closed off those 2 doors, tore out in the center the double doors that we have today. And this was part of Larry Roth's idea that as he stood in the pulpit, he wanted a central entrance that he could see people as they came in, and who was late and who wasn't. I don't know. But it's amazing to do a major change and not have anybody complain about it. Because years ago, there was an extra pew on the left-hand side up by the piano. We needed more space to put the baptismal fount there, and there was we were destroying the appearance of the church by taking that one pew out that no one ever sat in. And then the brass chandeliers on the back wall of the church were installed, and a canopy over the front steps was when we installed that. And all these changes were given by Florence Dix in memory of her husband Carl, who passed away December the 7th of 1979. And in September the 21st of 1980 was the 300th anniversary of the celebration of the Old Stone Church. And we had a worship service down there at 10 o'clock, and then communion afterwards was served out in the yard around the church. Then at noon there was a picnic on the grounds, and at 4 p.m. we had a festival praise service up here in the Fairton Church. And Dr. James Boyce from 10th Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia was the speaker. And Larry did an extensive research of the history of the church at that time and compiled the excellent booklet which was given out at the service on that day. And this is where I got a lot of my information. He did an excellent job. And there's only one or two of these booklets left around. We really should go on from where the end of his ministry and pick it up and continue with it. The next minister came to us in 1985 and served till 1992, and that was Alan Story. He had a wife, Linda Kay, and he had 3 sons. And Alan was an engineer before he went into the ministry. And Alan was a true Southerner. He grew up in Mississippi, and he and his wife had that Southern accent. And Alan carried on the biblical preaching which the congregation had been used to, and while he was here, he worked on his PhD degree at Westminster Seminary. And late in his ministry, the congregation became concerned over the length of his sermons and found that he was repeating himself. And people were leaving the church, and the session asked if he should seek another field of work. And he left in July of 1992. And then I got it. And the next minister, Alan Story, left in July of 72, and Mike Schulke came to us in
82.
92.
92. Yeah, I'm sorry, 92. And up until the present time. And of course, he came to us, he was 39 years old, and of course Susie, and he had 2 children, Lauren and Greg. And Mike graduated from Covenant Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri. And Pastor Mike came to us after the congregation extended a call to him in December of 1972. He was an assistant pastor at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Muncie, Indiana. And in December of this year, he will begin his 22nd year as a pastor. He will be serving as the 3rd longest pastor in the history of the church. His enthusiasm and dynamic preaching impressed the congregation from the beginning of his ministry. And after 21 years, he still preaches the same way, bringing the Word of God to the people each Sunday morning. As a result of his forceful preaching, many were attracted to the church. The Sunday morning attendance grew to about 120 people for the morning worship service. Shortly after the Schulkes came to Fairton, there was a need for a church secretary. The session found that Susie had the qualifications to fill this position and hired her. She is an excellent secretary and handles the administrative duties very well. She has the ability to know the needs of the congregation. Mike and Susie make an excellent team working together. You gotta bear with me a minute here. I'm trying to do this in numerical sequence. In May of 2004, the property next to the manse at the end of Church Lane came up for sale. Since it joined our property, the session and deacons decided that we should buy it. They were able to buy it for a reasonable price of $120,000. And the Shulkis were excited about moving into the new manse since it was a larger house and overlooked an inlet of the Cohansey River. The former manse then became the church office and meeting rooms for Sunday school, prayer groups, etc. And the bedrooms on the second floor were used to accommodate visiting ministers and others. And among our own people, it is known as a bed and breakfast, but get your own breakfast. And then we come to the 325th anniversary of the church, and that was on October the 13th to the 15th in 2006. There was a banquet held on Friday night at the Fairton Christian Center with over 100 attending. We were honored to have 3 of our former ministers present. They were Lincoln Griswold, Larry Roth, and Alan Story, and each spoke of their days in Fairton. On Saturday night, Larry Roth, an accomplished organist, gave an organ recital, and on Sunday, Dr. David Calhoun from Covenant Seminary in St. Louis brought the morning message. Mr. Wayne Sparkman, Director of Historical Center of the PCA in St. Louis, spoke at the Sunday School Hour. Pastor Schulke compiled a 6-page booklet for the celebration with the history of the church. Included in the booklet are pictures of the outside and inside of the old stone church with its high pulpit. And with modern technology of today, Pastor Mike was able to display a map of the location of the first church in 1680 and the location of the old stone church on the back cover of the booklet. And for anyone who might want to those booklets are still available. We have some extras there. Sorry to... in September of 2007, the congregation grew under Pastor Mike's leadership. Additional parking space was needed, and the Farmers and Merchants Bank property with a large parking area next to the church was vacant. The session and deacons negotiated with the bank officials for some time. The bank was asking $125,000 and finally agreed to sell the property to the church for $25,000. The bank building is used today by the men's Sunday school class and the parking lot by Sunday worshipers. And then in October of 2011, it was determined that a major work needed to be done in the basement fellowship hall. Dampness and mold had developed over the years, requiring major repairs to be done to correct these conditions at a cost of $65,000. The Presbyterian Church of America for the past 30 or 40 years has suffered from the people rejecting the application of the gospel as it is being preached from the pulpit and refusal to accept discipline from the elders. The discipline has always been not of condemnation, but one of hopes and restoration to a godly living again. Some people, not happy with the traditional type of worship service, are looking for a more entertaining rock and roll type of service. The goal of the preaching of the gospel is to have it apply to our lives as it improves our relationship with one another. This has been the goal of the PCA Church from the beginning, and is the goal of our church today. In closing, I trust you have found something of interest from my research of the history of the church and incidents I have recalled as a member for 80 years.